Welcome, PA scholars. This presentation is focused on UNHCR, which stands for United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. You will hear from my other colleagues, Nadia Browne, Anthony Taylor, and Anya, and also from me towards the end of this presentation. Stay tuned and I hope you enjoy.
Hi, my name is Anthony Taylor, and this part of the presentation is about the history of United Nations High Commissions for Refugees. The Office of the United Nations for High Commissioner of Refugees was created in 1950 after the Second World War to help millions of Europeans who had lost their homes or fled their homes. The United Nations of High Commission of Refugees won the Nobel Prize in 1954 due to its work for helping uplift Europeans who have lost their homes. In 1956, during the Hungarian Revolution, the United Nations for High Commission of Refugees helped 200,000 people who have fled neighboring Australia, recognizing that Hungarians as a primary FACE refugees. The United Nations led efforts to resettle them. The uprising and its aftermath shaped the way Hungarians organizations would deal with the refugees in the future. During the 1960s, the decolonization of Africa produced the first of that continent's numerous refugees crises. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees also helped uprooted people in Asia, Europe, and Latin America over the following 2 decades. In 1981, the United Nations received the second Nobel Peace Prize for what had become a worldwide assistance for refugees. At its height, in the mid-1990s, the United Nations for High Commission of Refugees was helping more than 27 million people worldwide each year. During the lifetime, the agency has assisted or an estimated 50 million people worldwide.
Good afternoon. My name is Anya. I will be discussing UNHCR's mission as well as their structure and budget, and I will provide an overview of some of the programs that the agency is doing on behalf of refugees around the world today. We'll begin by taking a look at the guiding principles, which you can see on the left side of the slide. These principles were redesigned in 2012 to promote more inclusiveness as well as program sustainability. Some of the 9 principles include uniqueness, which relates to certain refugees or displaced people's special needs, whether those are needs that arose from trauma that occurred during conflicts within their own country, also language needs, gender needs, cultural needs, and an agency awareness of the fact that they may need to respond on a case-by-case basis when it comes to unique individuals. Some of the other important principles are gender and diversity, as well as age, which are figured in when developing any new program to be fully inclusive, as well as participation, which reflects the need for the agency to work directly with refugees and displaced people to help design programs that will affect them most beneficially. Multi-sectoral and multi-partner relates to the need of the agency to work with other governments as well as international and non-governmental organizations to build the best programs. And sustainability at the bottom is the need for the agency to build programs that will last through to the resolution of a conflict, and often even longer than that, to continue to support people in various countries. Next, we'll take a look at the mission of the UNHCR, which is from the Global Report of 2007. And this mission essentially remains the same, but is adapted as needs change and refugee crises change around the world. So those major mission statements are to lead and coordinate international action for the worldwide protection of refugees, as well as the resolution of refugee problems, to safeguard human rights and well-being for refugees, to ensure that everyone can exercise the right to seek asylum, as well as to find safe refuge in another state, and also to return home voluntarily in the future once the crisis has been resolved. The agency also supports former refugees who have returned to their homeland, as well as internally displaced people, and people who are stateless or whose nationality is disputed. And the agency also focuses on the need to support children and to promote the equal rights of women and girls. We'll go to the next slide, which shows the structure and the budget of the UNHCR. It's important to note that 87% of UNHCR staff work in the field in 128 countries around the world, which leaves just 13% for administrative work and other programmatic needs, including 7% of those staff who work at the UNHCR headquarters in Geneva. The budget for the agency is $8.591 billion internationally, which is higher than 2018's budget of only $8.275 billion. So it's about $500 million, a budget increase in 1 year. And the reason for this is based on annually assessed needs. So with increasing crisis, the budget must also be increased. The 2019 budget responds to the needs of a projected 78.7 million people of concern around the world. And UNHCR uses their funding to protect international standards of human dignity, rights for refugees, access to asylum, to respond quickly and effectively in emergencies, to support internally displaced people and refugees, to empower refugees to contribute to communities and work towards securing their own future, as well as working in programs designed to work towards ending statelessness. The next slide shows some infographics which provide a portrait of global displacement in 2018. As I mentioned, in 2018, UNHCR is working in 128 countries in support of refugees, asylum seekers, displaced and stateless people. UNHCR estimates that 1 in every 113 people on Earth is an asylum seeker or internally displaced or a refugee. And they also estimate that every single minute, 24 people are displaced internationally around the world. UNHCR estimates that in 2018, there were 68.5 million forcibly displaced people around the world, and this is out of 78.7 million people of concern. And out of that number, 40 million are internally displaced, 25.4 million are refugees, and a little over 3 million are asylum seekers. UNHCR reports that 2018 saw the highest number of displacement ever before recorded. It's estimated that one person is forcibly displaced every 2 seconds, which adds up to nearly 45,000 persons per day forced to flee their home as a result of conflict or persecution. The next slide shows a world map that projects some of the current emergencies that UNHCR is involved in. As mentioned, in 2018, the number of displaced people is approximately the number of people of concern is approximately 78.7 million people, and that's up from just over 71 million in 2017. So that is a jump of nearly 7 million more people of concern in just a single year. And these are due to crises in Venezuela, in Syria, in Myanmar, in Africa, and throughout Southeast Asia and the Middle East. And the final slide that I will look at shows some of the top 10 current emergencies that the UNHCR is working in. Many of these are in Africa, as with Burundi, Congo, Central African Republic, Nigeria, South Sudan. Others are in the Middle East, as in Iraq, Syria, Yemen, as well as Southeast Asia, the Rohingya crisis in Myanmar, and also the crisis in Europe with refugees arriving from many different countries. In 2018, over 2/3 of all refugees worldwide came from just 5 countries. Those are Syria, Afghanistan, South Sudan, Myanmar, and Somalia. However, in 2018, only 34 countries accepted refugees for resettlement. One of those countries was the United States. It's estimated that we accepted approximately or nearly 54,000 refugees in 2017, but compared to the top hosts, which you'll see on the right of the screen, Turkey, for example, accepted over 2.5 million refugees. Pakistan accepted over 1.5 million. Lebanon over 1 million. And Iran, Ethiopia, and Jordan just under 1 million. So the 54,000 that the United States represents or accepted is a small number. Of the U.S. refugees that were accepted into the U.S., 40% were from the Middle East and Southeast Asia, and another 40% from Africa, a little under 10% from Asia and Europe, and only 3% from South America and the Caribbean. And a last note to point out is it's important to recognize that over 85% of all refugees and over 30% of asylum seekers are hosted currently by developing nations rather than those wealthier developed nations around the world. Okay, thank you for your attention. My colleagues will now speak more about UNHCR campaigns and programs designed to help prevent displacement and resolve the global refugee crisis.
Good afternoon. My name is Nadia Browne, and I will be discussing 2 current campaigns under the UNHCR agency. The first campaign I will be discussing is the I Belong campaign, followed by the Nobody Left Outside initiative. The I Belong campaign began in November 2014 with a 10-year mission to eradicate statelessness globally. Today, there are at least 10 million people worldwide who are currently stateless and have difficulty accessing basic rights such as education, healthcare, employment, and freedom of movement. The I Belong campaign is supported by a global action plan, which sets out concrete steps for states to help resolve the problem. Some of those steps include facilitating the confirmation of nationality for stateless minority groups that were born or resided there before a particular date or have parents or grandparents who meet these criteria. Allowing children to gain the nationality in which the country they were born in. Eliminating laws and practices that deny or deprive persons of nationality on the basis of discriminatory grounds such as race, ethnicity, religion, or minority status. And last but not least, ensuring a universal birth registration to prevent future statelessness. As of today, the UNHCR has rescued more than 166,000 stateless people that have acquired or had their nationality confirmed. They also assisted in helping 9 states establish or improved statelessness determination procedures and influenced 6 states to reform their nationality laws. With the necessary political and public support, millions of stateless people around the world could finally gain access to human rights. Right now, we are facing the biggest global displacement crisis since World War II. Nobody Left Outside is a global campaign established in 2016 to raise funds to build and improve shelters for 2 million refugees by the end of 2018. The campaign provides a range of shelter solutions and purchases over 70,000 tents a year to meet the needs of people in various situations and stages of displacement. From traditional temporary shelters to simple huts and long-term housing units, UNHCR developed a dual shelter model based on research and living conditions that could accommodate all refugees based on need. Today, more than 65 million people are still displaced from their homes, with shelter being the only means of their survival. Thank you.
Hello, I am Greshawna, and in this presentation, I will mention 5 accomplishments of the UNHCR. I will also identify some strengths and weaknesses of this organization, and I will also provide some strategic recommendations to better this organization. I will begin by looking at some accomplishments. On this slide, we see that by the start of 2017, out of 57,469 refugees in Burundi, Africa, UNHCR assisted all of them. The second point, we see that out of 3,613 asylum seekers in Burundi, Africa, UNHCR also assisted all of them. The third point, we see that out of 1,424,393 internally displaced persons in Afghanistan, UNHCR helped 299,647. At the fourth point, we see here that out of 59,737 refugees in Pakistan, UNHCR assisted all of them. And on the fifth point, we see that out of 11 refugees in China, UNHCR aided all 11. We will now take a look at some strengths and weaknesses of UNHCR. I will start with the strengths, which is on the left-hand side of the slide. UNHCR is working in 128 countries around the world in effort to assist nearly 79 million persons of concern. The second point is, which I find really impressive, that 90% of UNHCR staff works in the field and only 10% administrative, meaning indoors. UNHCR has become increasingly engaged in regional and global policy discussions and initiatives on the interface between refugee protection and international migration. UNHCR has consistently emphasized that states are the most important actors in addressing the challenges of mixed movements. Regional conferences brought together governments from source, transit, and destination countries, providing a forum for states to discuss mixed movements from a range of different perspectives. We'll now look at some weaknesses. This is on the right-hand side of the slide. The first weakness is that only 1% of refugees are ever permanently resettled, and this number must and should be improved. The next weakness here is that nearly 90% of current refugees and asylum seekers are hosted by developing nations. UNHCR should and must do more to encourage the world's wealthiest nations to take on more responsibility in assisting our asylum seekers and others, and refugees and others. UNHCR's work is focused on dealing with the victims of emergencies, but is less effective in helping to prevent those emergencies. In other words, they need to create some system in place to prevent these emergencies to begin with. Next point here is that UNHCR must encourage member states to respect the human rights of refugees and migrants and to support the countries that welcome them. And last but not least, UNHCR must encourage refugee hosting countries to adopt inclusive policies that allow migrants to work and contribute to their economy and society in sustainable ways. We'll now take a look at some strategic recommendations to improve this organization. The first one, UNHCR should ease pressure on countries that welcome and host refugees. 2. Expand access to resettlement in third countries and other complementary pathways. 3. Foster conditions that enable refugees voluntarily to return to their home country. 4. Reduce forced displacement by partnering with states and institutions to create conditions that will protect human rights and lead to peaceful resolution of disputes. 5. Focus on needs of children and promote equal rights for women and girls. 6. Increase collaboration with partners including governments, regional groups, international and non-government organizations. 7. Build self-reliance of refugees and strengthen programs that allow refugees to participate directly in decisions that affect them. And last but not least, encourage and improve global response and funding to support large-scale refugee movements. On this slide, you see here our references. And last but not least, this is our team. Thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed this presentation and I hope you learned something. I'm not sure if Professor will upload this video on Blackboard, but it will be a great way for us to have some discussion if you have any questions. Thank you very much. Have a good one.